Welcome to the Lightforge podcast. This is Adwictum.
This is Merps. Hello. I'm here. Oh god, I look terrible.
Congratulations to Merps, a new
Oh my
daddy.
god. I see myself on the stream right now. I look terrible.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah,
man,
you do not look good right now.
I look
But
bad.
I'm sure you look worse a week ago and even worse 2 weeks ago.
Maybe. I don't know. There's definitely some like caked milk stains on my shirt right here. Oh god, you can see it. Oh yeah. This is
Yeah.
great. All right, so
Milk stains.
I have some coffee on on my table. It is sustaining me right now. I have a lot of coffee these days, but we're gonna power through. I have not played a single arena run, by the way. I've not played a single arena run. It's probably for the best,
Mm-hmm.
as we will talk about. But arena is in an interesting spot ever since the expansion released. It seems very long. Well, first of all, my sense of time is very different from everybody else's sense of time, but I know a lot of people have expressed tons of frustration with the current meta, and we should just dive right into it because March of the Lich King is live. We have the new Death Knight class and
Merps,
everything.
you know I had to turn your volume up by about 20% because you sound so beat and tired that it's
I'm
actually
very
lowering your
beat
volume.
and tired. Although it might be my mic. I don't know. I can't tell anymore. I really can't tell. So look, March of the Lich King is out. New class is out. And we're just going to talk about the new class because that is literally the only thing that matters. We are at a point in which, if you have played, you know what I'm talking about, but we can just set the table right now with a simple HS replay stat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Simple HS replay stat. You go to hsreplay.net, you click on win rates for the arena. Number one is Death Knight at 62.1%.
It's very
Remember,
low. It used to be 64 point something.
it used to be 64, right? Um, Also, guys, remember, this includes Death Knights facing Death Knights. One has to lose. The reason that it got lower, I believe, is because more and more people, I think they're just like retiring to get Death
Yes,
Knights.
it's definitely happening.
They're just retiring decks to get Death Knights. So there's more Death Knight v Death Knight matchups, which necessarily lowers the win rate from 64%, pulling it, trying to pull it somewhat back down to 50. But then the innocent and helpless like shaman or priest is out there trying to dodge these death knights, and they'll match up against it and they will just lose. So look, 62.1% death knight win rate. Paladin is sitting at 51.8%, and it is the last class to be over 50% by a significant margin.
Yeah,
Then
not
we
even
have
close.
not even close. Not even close. There is a delta of more than 6% from Paladin to Demon Hunter, which is sitting at 45.4%. And then we have Warrior sitting at the bottom. Also, this is not one of those metas in which it's like, oh, Warrior is like 6% away from the next one. No. You could basically lump Shaman, Hunter, Druid, and Warrior at the absolute shit tier. Warrior is sitting at 34.3%. Shaman is at 37%. Anything below
Uh,
40% is abysmally low. Like, it is not worth your time to play.
yes.
Um, you will not have fun. It's not worth it. You clawing 3 wins instead of like settling for one. I don't know. In no definition, even by Adultus standards,
Yes.
like that is not fun. Like that is,
I don't play any
yeah,
class that is below like I think 44% win rate. I don't play them. You see me on stream. I avoid those classes. I'll play all classes that
yeah.
that Twitch chat wants me to play, but not those because those are not classes.
They are
they are not in this game. They are
they
not
are
in the
not
arena.
classes. Nope, they are not classes at all. So, uh, this is where we are at. If you are playing the arena and you do not get Death Knight, I am sorry. You can try to salvage it. Well, first of all, if you get Paladin,
Yeah, it's
you're
okay.
good. You're good. Paladin has strong cards, which we can talk about a little bit later. But if you get Death Knight, great. You're just playing the meta. It's not like, oh, you lucked out. You're just playing the meta. You get Death Knight, you play the meta. You get Paladin, you're still playing the meta. Like you're
Hmm.
in the game, right? You get something else, you're not in the game. You're not
Yeah.
playing the same game as anybody else. So 2 out of 11 classes, congrats, you are in the game. You're not ahead, you're just playing what everybody else is
Like
playing.
right now,
Yeah.
we're basically in, and this is because I've been playing a lot of Diablo Immortal PvP, but we're basically in a pay-to-win game where they don't let you pay to win. Instead, whoever happens to get Death Knight just wins, unless you're facing another Death Knight. And Paladin is like that medium option that comes in now and then and goes, I will lose to Death Knights only 3 times out of 4. And everybody else is like a free-to-play player in a very pay-to-win mobile game in which Death Knight is the person that drops like, I don't know, 100k into the game. You just can't compete, you know? It's not a matter of skill. You gotta have like such insane luck to be able to get even close to there. So that's where Hearthstone is right now in the arena. And I draw this comparison to the pay-to-winness because in a game like Diablo Immortal, or any like good pay-to-win game, I guess, or any decent, I wouldn't even say good, you don't have direct matchups, or if you do, they don't matter. Because the games realize it's really pointless to put someone with like twice as much damage and health against someone with half as much damage and health when there's not a lot of other things going on. So they don't do that. They'll do weird things that make a team-based play, make objectives games play, make supporting be actually used. They'll do a lot of things, right? Where they'll find some uses for people with lower stats. That doesn't exist in a 1v1 game like Hearthstone. So Arena right now is just non-functional outside of Death Knight and kind of Paladin. There's no need to sugarcoat it. Now, getting to the good part of this. The good part of this is that if you do roll a Death Knight, one, you won't face a lot of non-Death Knights. So you won't feel like you're beating up on free-to-play players too much. You will quickly beat them if they ever pop up, but most of your games will be against other Death Knights and the occasional Paladin, so you'll feel pretty good about that. And two, Death Knight v Death Knight games are pretty damn fun. There's
a significant newness factor to it, and it's pretty cool because of the runes. Now, if you ask some of these people who have streamed a lot of it, especially man-children streamers, of which I will not name, a lot of them are very tired of it by now because of all of the things that you have said.
Because it's one class against one class, and that's the entirety of the arena.
Yes. So I will say that yes, it is fun for some. No, it is definitely not fun for others. But luckily, if you have not spammed Arena, it is pretty... Oh, okay, this is a caveat. If you don't get Death Knight like 5 times in a row, it's going to be super triggering and tilting because you will have essentially...
I mean, you would just lose a lot of gold, but you don't have to play any of those unless you're
Yeah,
mean.
but... okay, you don't care about gold. A lot of people do care about gold.
Yeah.
Right? Like, wasting, let's say, like 900 gold is not... not wasting, but effectively getting super, like low EV on those runs, right? I think a lot of people will be unhappy. So... a little or big asterisk next to Adulta's statement. It is fun if you haven't played a lot and you get Death Knight. Very fun at the beginning because you get to play with all this stuff. You get to think about the rune system, which is cool. You get to use this new corpse mechanic, and by use I mean super abuse it with some totally busted cards. And it's fun. It's really the one time. It's the closest we have gotten in Arena to some sort of constructed level. Like I play my bomb, you play your bomb. I do my thing, you do your like. This whole thing where you look at constructed and they're like, okay, well that was an amazing turn. Wait, they're following up with that turn? And I know that constructed people are used to this by now. It's like, okay, they're used to that sort of power level. And I'm not saying we're at that level yet. But in Arena, we have not seen this level of like just Godzilla, Mothra like fight against each other that we see now. So that could be fun for you. That could be fun. I will say
it's not just that the power levels are higher, that the swings are high. I hate both of those things. But what it is you get to actually build a deck. It gets the most like synergy picks are working now. It's just called the rune system. They just changed synergy picks into the rune system, and it works wonderfully in the draft. And then in the game, you get to play with your very well synergized deck and do the things that Merps is talking about. And your opponent gets to do the same thing because they're also a Death Knight, clearly. Because, you know, you're not 0-2 with your Death Knight run, unlike someone, me. We salvaged that run to 9. But my point is, if you're just Death Knighting against Death Knight, you're playing an arena that is powerful but synergized and feeling good, assuming there were more classes than Death Knight, right? Like, assuming that you're not just playing one class against one class. Like, imagine if you always had to play Paladin against Paladin. You would get bored pretty fast, right? Even if they made Paladin amazing, you would get bored of Paladin v Paladin pretty fast. So that's what's happening right now if you don't play, if you're like spamming arenas. You're maybe getting a little sick of Death Knight v Death Knight, but it doesn't change the fact that Death Knight is an excellently crafted class with no seriously overpowered non-legendary cards. I'm going to put that statement out there. 0 seriously overpowered in a way that, nothing to Cavern's level problematic cards in Death Knight. Now, it seems like they have all the problematic cards because of the synergy picks. You have one class that not only has no old cards to dilute their picks, so their picks of strong cards versus so when you get offered your class cards of strong cards versus weak cards is like 4 times what every other class is. Then, on top of that, all of your cards synergize at a higher frequency than other people's because they're basically all in one set, right? One big package set for Constructed. And on top of that, there's not the dilution. Like, if you want to think mathematically about how dilution works, it's not like linear. If you diluted the Death Knight pool with 10% more shitty cards that you'll never pick, Death Knight does not get 10% less powerful. The synergies for Death Knight gets like 30% less powerful. That's how synergies work. So when you have not only no weak cards, but on top of that, an actual synergy system, an actual synergy pick system via runes built into the draft process, you have these insane decks. So again, individual cards for Death Knight. Like, people are looking at it and it's like, oh, how do we nerf Death Knight cards or offering rates or whatever? It's like, yeah, you can nerf offering rates a little bit, and then it'll have a pretty big effect. But I just want to kind of get it out there that Death Knight cards are not OP. None of the Death Knight cards that are not legendary are OP.
So here's, I think, what you mean by it. And because I already see the comments in chat. The power of Death Knight, a lot of it comes from, and look, I haven't played any, but I have watched way too many streams, and I like exposing my child to Dreads' stream because I believe that babies need to interact with other babies, and it's, quarantine, so that's the best way I can do it. But by watching Dreads' stream, like, he made a comment that he's like, you know which card I hate the most? He's like, Plague Strike. And it's Plague Strike, if you don't know, it is single green. I'm using your color system, okay? Mm-hmm. I'm not doing the 2 mana for a common shadow spell. Deal 3 damage to a minion. If that kills it, summon a 2/2 zombie with Rush. And he was just saying, he's like, it's not the most powerful card, but it's very emblematic of sort of what Death Knights do, which is they always remove you, number one. You should never ask, it's like, oh, can this Death Knight remove? Yes, the answer is yes. The Death Knight can always remove you. Always, like 100%. And then they can always do it in an efficient manner that gives them more stuff and allows them to cheat, quote, cheat mana in a way that you, as another class, cannot. Always. So it's 100% that.
But
so
that's not a Death Knight thing. If you look at the standard meta, every class can do that. It's only a Death Knight thing because Death Knight is playing a standard meta right now while everybody else is in a crappy wild meta.
Yeah. They can always do it consistently, right? Yes. Like, they always have the
and so can every other class if you limited their sets to what Death Knight has. This is not a Death Knight card problem. This is a rotation problem. So if you took everyone
Sure.
else and you didn't give them the 3x crappy cards and you just gave them the standard set cards, they would be heavily anti-diluted, and they would have, because it's not like they don't have these cards. All the classes have these cards. They just don't get offered them because they have like one of them, and Death Knight has like 4 of them. But if they had the same number of cards from the standard meta in the pool, then they would all have 4 of them. And then they would all have the same numbers, and then you wouldn't have this problem. So it's true that Death Knights do get to do this in this meta and other classes don't. But I don't think that's a problem with the design of Death Knight, even in the arena. That's just kind of looking at the symptom that we can tell that there's something wrong with it. But what's wrong with it is not that Death Knights can do this. What's wrong with it is that other classes can't. And we know exactly why other classes can't. Because they actually can normally. They're just being given crappy sets, while Death Knight is being given the normal set.
Yeah, it's all relative. Like this is Death Knights have that consistency. They can always clear you. They can always have also they just have a lot of and I understand it depends on the runes, but they also have a lot of ways to like gain life, right? So it's just really annoying if you think that it's like, oh, maybe I can rush down a Death Knight. You can't.
Yeah, you can't.
You can't. Can you play value against a Death Knight? Probably not.
No, you can't.
No, you can't.
You can't do anything against a Death Knight.
No, you can't do anything.
Like that's why they have a 60% win rate.
Yes, if there was a way to exploit it, like people would exploit it,
Mhm.
but there's not really ways to exploit them turn after turn, consistently getting more value out of their cards, and making bigger swings and protecting their life total just better than you.
Yeah.
Like it's just a complete domination.
Like, you guys know we love to give this take. Every single time there's an overpowered class, if there is a way around it, we'll tell you that way around it, and we oftentimes think the second or third highest win rate class is actually the most powerful class currently in the current meta. We do that a lot because you're looking at the win rates of like 4.5 win players. That's not the correct win rate. The correct win rate is always different than that. But in this case, 62% and like 52%, that is not there's some secret sauce that people haven't caught on to yet. No, Death Knight crushes everything, including Paladin the vast majority of times, and absolutely decimates everybody else. There's no competition. But yeah, just looking at so we're in this meta, right? And you look at how do you solve this meta? Well, the easiest way is to go standard, right? Easy, super easy. And I think Matt London already announced that the next rotation is going to be standard, but that's not happening for 2 months. So what are you doing in this period? How do you actually solve the problem?
I think I'm solving it pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, okay, besides not playing the game, which, I mean, I canceled a stream that I wanted to do a bonus stream on Wednesday night too, and then on Tuesday night, which is opening night, I played, and I was like, nope, I'm not doing it. And then on Friday night, when I played my normal stream, I actually got Death Knight for both of my runs. And it was fun and interesting. I didn't do so well with it, but it's still, if I didn't get Death Knight, it would have been a very boring night of trying to. Okay, you know what? I'm going to amend that statement again. If you are not playing Death Knight, you will actually have a not terrible meta. I don't think it's a good meta, but it's not actually a terrible meta if you're facing other non-Death Knight and Paladin classes. Because I have played
just dodge.
Yeah,
Death
I'm not saying you're ever going to get to 12 or 9 or 6 wins.
Wow.
But if you play a regular class, just the meta is not fundamentally broken in that way, right? The meta is just broken for Death Knights. So what I'm getting at is, if you're trying to fix the problem of Death Knights, you could bring the Death Knights down to everybody else, or you could bring everybody and Paladins, or you could bring everybody else up to Death Knights, right? Those are your kind of 2 options. There's no way to bring Death Knights down without totally killing Death Knights to 35% win rate. That's too big. You can only bring Death Knights down a little. So you can bring Death Knights down, like I said before, if you reduce their class cards by 10%, you're reducing their effectiveness by like 20% or 30% or whatever. So you don't have to move Death Knights down too much to get a pretty big effect. But what you don't want to do, what you absolutely don't want to do, And I keep hearing this from people, and I'm scared that, I don't know, maybe Matt London's team is going to do this for the balancing, is you do not want to bring the other classes up to Death Knight level. Now wait, you say, Adwick, didn't you just say in the standard mode every class is like Death Knight, and that's why Death Knight is actually not problematic, really? So then why wouldn't we bring every class up to Death Knight? Well, because we're not in a standard meta. We are in a old meta with only one, well, technically two standard sets, but like power-wise, only one real like current modern set in the rotation. Which means that the only way to bring the bad classes up to Death Knight standards, if you're sitting there being like, Death Knight is fun, everyone should do what Death Knight does. Don't nerf, just buff. Again, you know, if you listen to this podcast right now, you know we hate that line. Don't nerf, buff. That is like just the most brain dead statement. Like nerf and buff, right? If you just buffed, or even if you majority buffed instead of nerfing, what you'll end up with is the 1 or 2 actual good cards in each of these class in this rotation being offered like 8 times in every draft. You will have to do that to get its win rate up to where Death Knight is. You will have to. The algorithm will tell you that, whatever they're using to do this, or you could trial and error. That's what the end result is going to be. And that is going to create the same exact deck for every single class that is not Death Knight. And Death Knight has at least 3 decks, probably like 6 decks, and Paladin. So that's just not, like, I hope they don't do that, because if they do that, you're going to complain a lot more. Like, you're going to turn the good part, right? I keep saying is the good part about the current meta is if you select Death Knight and you're good at the game, and you get offered Death Knight, and you go and face other Death Knights. It's decent. Like it's pretty good actually. You know, if you're not like spamming it, you're gonna get rid of that if you buff out all the other classes, because then not everyone will play Death Knight anymore. There'll be a more variety of classes, and they'll all be the same with their worst, most ridiculously triggering cards. Because these other classes are not designed well like Death Knight, because they only have one set, which means they only have 2 really good cards. And those cards are going to super dominate everything to match Death Knight. And that is a terrible, unfun game. And you will meet these other classes quite frequently, because Death Knight, remember, is only offered in, I don't know what the exact percentage is, but it's like 30%, 25%, some low percentage of your actual runs will end with Death Knight. Whereas these other classes, if they become viable, people will stop retiring to get Death Knight. They'll just play these decks out. And then you'll end up facing, in a run, not like hit a Death Knight wall and then have to play Death Knight v Death Knight, but instead, you'll play whatever deck you play, and then every single match past, like, I don't know, 3 wins will be the most awful game of the most awful cards and everything you hate about Hearthstone, and there will be almost no skill involved for any of the classes except for Death Knight. Like, that's not what you want. So you're in this problematic part where I don't think they can fix it. Like, honestly, I don't think there's anything the dev team can do while keeping this rotation to balance Death Knight at 62% with Warrior at 34% without either totally killing Death Knight, which they won't do because Death Knight is fun. And the last thing you want to do is to take the one fun thing and the centerpiece of this whole entire freaking like expansion and get rid of it. So if you don't do that, the only other way to bring the numbers together is to raise the bottom classes, and that will result in the most awful meta. So they have no ability to actually solve the problem. Like, that's where
Fantastic. We're at. Great. So what do you think is going to happen? Like, in the next few weeks, next few months, like, what is your prediction of like the roadmap? Like,
I think what's going to happen is they're just going to fail to they're going to quote unquote try to balance the arena, while I think internally they know that they are not balancing the arena. And they're going to quote-unquote try every 2 weeks and just kind of let the meta exist where it is. None of the other classes will be playable. And Death Knight will be nerfed maybe 10%, maybe 15%, and it will align roughly in power level at that point with Paladin, maybe still be a little bit better than Paladin, and every other class will still be unplayable. That's my prediction.
Great. That sounds fantastic.
So yeah, if you guys are thinking of playing some arena for a skill or whatever, or just having a good time and not retiring runs, I just don't think that that's a possibility for the next 2 months. Sadly. But on the bright side, if you just want to like get some Death Knight like games in and you're cool with retiring,
So instead of the actual win rate leaderboard through 30 runs, they could literally replace it with who high, like, don't even give the average because that's assumed. Just say this person got 22 out of 30 Death Knights and
yes.
therefore they win. All of these people got 22, so they tie. This person got 21, so they're one spot below, and that should just be it. It should just be the frequency of Demon Hunter in 30 consecutive runs average.
I
That's
think
it.
something that they can do, and this is really out there, I don't think they're actually going to do it, and I also don't think that they have the technical ability to do it, but they should really just get rid of all the other classes in Arena and just have like an event
Yeah, no,
that's
no,
like Death Knight.
yes, yes. No, no, like, okay, you said there was nothing they could do. Honestly, and this is not a joke because some people might be like, "Oh, this is a joke."
No.
This is the way. Honestly, like Matt, if you're listening to this, this doesn't have to be a permanent thing. But
Yeah.
like, look, for the next, I don't know, few weeks, does anybody really mind? Because this is just what it is right now. Like, this is the reality that we're in. Take away the RNG. Just do only Death Knight Arena,
Mm-hmm.
and the only sort of limited format, whatever, is the cards that you draft,
Yep.
right?
So you still have the rotation, but it's just Death Knight.
Yeah,
And then,
perfect idea.
I don't
Great
know,
idea.
maybe in early January do the change of rotation rather than the typical wait 2 months to change the rotation. Like, normally the rotation changes every 2 months, but that's not like a law. They can change the rotation whenever the hell they want. And this is emergency mode here. Like, Arena does not exist without you changing the rotation. So, ideally, what I would do, given the tools that they have, is just make like I don't know if it's possible. I honestly don't. Maybe the best they can do is make sure Death Knight appears in every selection choice, and then just screw over the people who don't know and pick another class. Because I don't think they could just make it be like Death Knight, Death Knight, Death Knight, or just like one Death Knight choice and the other
Oh
two are not
God.
choices. That feels like a
Oh,
coding thing that they can't
well,
do.
that's even worse when you see it's like, I don't know, like, okay, you queue up and then you see at 0 wins, their username is like Fred loves cake.
Oh
And you're just
god.
like, "Oh, Fred, you might love cake, but you know nothing about Arena. I'm so sorry." It's like you made this choice for yourself, right? And it wasn't really a choice. Like, I don't. I'm assuming you want to win, Fred, but like, I hope you have some good cake because you are about to get like completely stomped, and they're gonna be so mad because they're just going to get absolutely crushed. Like, that choice actually increases the delta of Death Knights being good versus everything else being bad, right? Because the bad players, or the people who just don't care and YOLO,
Mhm.
right? They will pick everything else, and the people who care even the slightest
Yeah.
bit will pick Death Knights. Uh,
And even the people who
yeah.
don't care will probably pick Death Knight. It's the new class. It's the cooler class. Like, if all else being the same, you would just kind of pick Death Knight until you like played it enough that you got bored of it. So the people who are
So
purposefully picking away from Death Knight when you have Death Knight as an option, like I don't know who these people would be, but they're gonna lose, and maybe that's okay, right? Maybe we're just like, all right, they'll learn.
yeah, look, I love that idea. First of all, like you mentioned that idea of just take away all the other classes for now because that's effectively what it is,
Mm-hmm.
and just do Death Knight versus Death Knight Arena. So good. It solves so many
Yeah.
problems. Actually, I love it.
Well,
Please,
because
Death
the
Knight,
other things you
do this.
can't solve the problem otherwise. The normal tools
Yes.
don't work for this particular situation. And I mean, okay. So on one hand, this was all entirely predictable. By the way, like this was. On the other hand, um, I know other people did not miss it, but we definitely missed it. Like we were not predicting Death Knight at over 60% win rate, and looking
Yeah,
back on
I
it, we
didn't
should have.
think this would
Yeah.
happen. I didn't think this would happen. Like, did I think Death Knight was going to be very powerful at the start? Yes. This is unacceptably broken
Hmm.
powerful. So I didn't think this would happen. And if you guys thought it was going to be this level of bad, congrats. I don't know how many people predicted it would be this bad.
There were some of the streamers were predicting it was going to be this level of bad, like historically bad, and I you
So
know,
not just like historically bad, as in like we've never seen something like this terrible.
yeah,
Like
that's what
yeah.
historically bad means.
Well, well, historically bad isn't like we can still compare it to something in history, right? Like not like all time. Like isn't historically different than all time, like or the most like ever.
I, I thought they were the same. I don't know. I'm terrible with words, but I didn't always use and interpret it historically as in all time, like in all of history, right? Historically, like this has never happened before. But anyway, regardless of how that word is used, I think we all agree that this is the worst that it has ever been. Mathematically, like data wise, right? This is literally the highest win rate of any class for any duration. I don't even think like the really bad ones we had for like a few days or a week were as bad as 64%. Maybe they got to 62. But this is kind of the evening out point, right? Like you said, it's just Death Knight's facing Death Knights, and so Death Knight has to lose. That's how you're getting this win rate.
At this point, people are actively retiring their decks if they don't get Death Knight, and for good reason. I mean, like if you're not gonna have fun, why salvage that 2-win run anyways, right?
Yeah.
Like what's the point? I understand
Yeah.
the difference between your rewards at 2 wins versus 0 wins. Like, is that worth the headache and the
Mm-hmm.
frustration? Probably not. So
And again, I see the comments in chat about how good Death Knight is and why. Death Knight is not that good. I really need to. I want to drill this into everybody's collective consciousness about this, because this is talked about so much. So many people right now are like, "Look how good Death Knight is." Death Knight with current set cards is better than the other classes
it is
with
significantly better.
with
Yes.
this
With
wild
shit
rotation.
cards. Yes.
Like that is the comparison. Death Knight in this, like let's say this year's all the Death Knight cards that were released this year versus all of the Warrior cards that have been released this year is not that big of a difference. I don't know if Death Knight is better, probably, but it's not that much better.
Yes.
It's like a few percentage points better.
This problem that exists has been made significantly worse by them bringing back really, really bad cards for other classes, while Death Knight gets all of these basically new shiny, or a much higher portion of their cards are new shiny end of 2022 cards, and other classes, if you just look, pick by pick, right, the average
Mm-hmm.
quality, you get some real dumpster tier cards with the other classes much more frequently.
Yep.
And look, it's so when Advocate says like DK is not as strong, it's they are helped out, and unfortunately the meta is significantly hurt by the rotation right now.
Yeah.
So if
I'm
you
talking
had
about
a standard
fundamentally,
rotation, yeah,
like with the
fundamentally,
cards, right? Like I'm basically saying no DK cards need to be nerfed. And that is a
yeah,
statement that I think a lot of people disagree with, and I think they're wrong. I think Death Knight is fine where it is. The problem is the structure. The structural elements are the entirety of the problem. Like, can you nerf Death Knight cards and it's okay? Yeah, of course. Like, you can nerf a few
yes,
cards. We have Death
so
Knight has A
yes,
tier cards.
if the question is can you balance out Death Knights without actually nerfing the cards, yeah, you can. Like you are able to do that just through the rotation and meta considerations. It's just too punishing whenever other classes are playing like 3 mana 3/3s
Yeah.
that have no special effects, right?
And Death
It's
Knight is
just
playing a
too
3
bad.
mana 3/3 taunt with another 3/3 coming out when it dies.
Or a 3 mana 3/4 that draws a card when undead dies,
And all
which
your cards
means
are undead. And your
yeah,
hero
which
power.
and your hero power, which means it's effectively a 3 mana 3/4 that draws like 2 cards at least on average.
And
So
that card is not even an A tier card.
yes. And it's right. There's a difference between on paper, sort of like how good a card is objectively versus how good a class is in a meta, right?
Yeah,
So that is your point. But I think people
yeah,
will catch on with the fact that it's like they're like, oh, Adocta is saying it sucks. Um, it it's just like, yeah, there's not like a single kind of like it's like, oh, these 5 cards have to be nerfed.
no.
The balance is possible. You
The,
just can't give other classes these old cards.
Yeah, like the top Death Knight cards are not really that bad compared to the top cards of the other classes that have been released this year.
Yeah.
And that's what we're saying, or even last year. Some of the top ones. So there's no actual power creep or systemic issue with Death Knight. Now, I'm going to put asterisks on that in that the drafting format with the runes does make it more synergistic, and we'll see what how big that problem becomes when we have a better meta. Because right now you really can't tell. Like Death Knight is just so powerful in all ways; it is really hard to break down what percentage of it is due to what power. Okay, I'm gonna wrap this up on the overall meta of Death Knight. It's kind of pointless to talk about the overall meta because it's Death Knight versus Death Knight. Right?
We are talking about Death Knights, so therefore we are talking about.
Yeah, exactly. There we go.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have already covered the entirety of the meta. Looking at individual cards, I know everybody loves the whole what did you guys get wrong in the previous in the card preview, and this time around, all the cards we said were top cards. That's been fine. But we did miss some that are actually performing way better, and I think that means they actually are way better. This isn't I'm taking out the ones that they're performing better, but there's a reason for them. So if you look at the win rates, I think the third best neutral card is Arms Dealer. That's because Death Knights pick Arm Dealer more, because Arms Dealer is way better for a Death Knight than any other class, because undead. And Death Knights win way more than all the other classes. So Arms Dealer looks like it is a insanely good card, and it is not. It's just the Death Knight win rate pulling it up, and the disproportionate drafting of this card by Death Knight players, which is all correct. If you told me Death Knight's win rate was going to be 62%, I would say, okay, so Arms Dealer and Bone Flinger are going to be some of the top cards in the meta, by win rate, by strict win rate, across all classes even. And that's just what's happening. But some cards that we rated, I think a C or a C+, I forget, they're I think these cards are legit B or B+. And the two neutral ones that I want to bring up is one, Coroner. Coroner is the one that I think if you play it on turn 4 or something or after, it silences at first, but then it normally is a 2-mana 2/2 freeze. So that didn't look particularly powerful to me when we were doing it. We still gave it a C or a C+. I really should find out exactly what we gave it as we're talking about it. But we weren't I don't think it was ever close to a B+. And it's performing like a B+, basically, maybe a B, like a high B or a B+. And I think that's right. Yeah, we gave it a C. We didn't even give it a C+. And that's because the silence, maybe it's partly the meta with all the death rattles and the reborns and whatever, but the silence is huge, and you can silence.
Sorry, I will let you finish first.
Okay, so the silence is huge, and you can just use it as a silence and just treat the freeze as a total side benefit, and it's a 2-mana 2/2 silence that you can't play until turn 4 or above. And that is much better in this meta, and maybe in all metas, than what we had been giving it.
You know why it's so good? It's because it is good against a lot of the Death Knight cards, amazing against Paladins.
Ah, okay.
Yes. It is really good against Paladins, because Paladins play... Here's the thing. Paladins play exactly the way that you expect Paladins to play. They just do it better now. And then, of course, they have this stupid 1-mana Discover a Dragon. That thing Paladins shouldn't do, right? But everything else, sort of Seal of Blood and everything, it's just them doing Paladin things So you having silence, it's like, okay, silence has always been good against paladins whenever they play their annoying paladin buff ways. They just have more ways to do it right now. So silence is good. And then of course it still is good against DKs, but DKs have like, it's not like DKs just have like consolidate into one minion, right? They'll like every one of their minions has a death rattle, or
Yeah,
they'll
this
like,
is just very
do something
playable,
weird.
and it'll
It's
just
very
get
playable. It's
value
very playable.
whenever.
It will always get value. So silence, the problem is like, well, if it's just silence and I can't do anything with it, like uh owl, right? It's not great. But if it can do something else, if it is more flexible, and if the meta matches it, we had metas in which Silent Librarian was very good, right? And because it was tradable as well, you're like, oh, okay, like I can always turn this into something else. But this card, we're just seeing a meta in which like it's always good. Starting from turn 6, you always, if you're facing a Death Knight, if you're facing a Paladin, you will always have something to silence such that it is going to always be bigger than the 2 mana
Hmm.
that you spend for it. Like always, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I didn't even think into that deep of the matchups, but yeah, those are the targets, and they are everywhere, and they're the games that you care about. So yeah, so Coroner draft it at least a B, if not a B plus, rather than the C that we told you. And the other neutral card that we rated too low is Incorporeal Corporal, which we also rated a C. And this is the 2 mana 5/5 that dies whenever you attack anything. And we rated it a C. And we thought it was good. We thought it was like a controllable snipe with 1 extra damage. Like it's good, but it's really good. This card is like a B plus. I've been locked out of the board so hard by this card because it trades up with almost anything that you put out there. And if it's going to trade down, you just don't attack with it. You just let it stay there until eventually you kill their 4-drop. Like, so this card, actually, in a weird way, is a lot like what's that why am I blanking on this card? It's the 2 mana one that rushes and is a 3/5. And it's off the board for 2 turns.
Oh, the dormant
Yeah,
one?
yeah, the dormant one. Biofiend?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Biofiend. That's right. So in a weird way, it functions kind of like Biofiend in that you play it. This one isn't dormant, but your opponent's not gonna like if your opponent spends enough stuff to remove something at 5 health that you played on turn 2 as a 2-drop, you've already gotten value, right? So it's effectively dormant. And then it pops out whenever you want it to and deals 5 damage and dies, rather than that one which deals 3 damage and lives. So it's like a weird Vilephin kind of thing. And we all know how much better Vilephiend was than one we expected. So maybe I haven't learned my lesson. And two, just how good it is. Period. So Incorporeal Corporal is definitely at least a B, if not a B plus, and we rated it a C. So those are the two that I think we missed. The ones at the top are all like the power cards are all what you would think. Vizier is absurd. Silvermoon Sentinel and Silvermoon Armor are holding their own win rate wise for as A tier cards, low A tier cards, like we said. I think that was really funny too with Silvermoon Sentinel and Silvermoon Armor because they started out with a much lower win rate, and their win rate has been slowly creeping up as people figure out how to frickin' use these. As people realize you don't always have to hold them, and you can play them. So that part was
It's
interesting
the
to me.
ooze effect.
Yeah, except people are actually learning, whereas I'm pretty sure people still have not learned about ooze.
Well, I mean, the people who are playing Arena at this stage,
Mm,
Arena in late 2022, I don't know how many actual newbies we have left.
that's fair. That is fair. And then the other big ones are the epics, Enchanter, Hawkstrider, Rancher. Those are all performing super well as well. And the on the legendary side, Alistair is we may have underrated it. We rated it A plus, and I just lose to it every time I see it. And whenever I play it, I've lost while playing it though. So I don't know. Maybe we probably rated it right. A plus, maybe a very low S.
Would have won
Um,
if it was Pyros.
Back in the day, if it was Pyros, yeah, you just win card advantage. Here, I don't know. You're probably facing a Death Knight, so I don't know. Death Knights could do a bunch of stuff. Um, yeah. So anyway, those are the kind of neutral cards. On the Death Knight side, the big things that I realized that we missed on is this whole series of cards, and they're all green. And they're all green, including both of the ones that are 3 green. Plague Grain and Grave Strength, which I think we both rated a D on both, and they are actually very good. We missed because we did not properly factor in the synergy. And we said we weren't factoring in the synergy properly as we were rating these cards. And it's come back to bite us in that Plague Grain's a good card. Grave Strength is a great card. Stitch Giant, we rated a D, and that is absurdly good. It's one of the best cards, actually. That's like the biggest miss we've probably like ever had. And all of this comes back to the fact that the green stuff, if you get a lot of green runes, the unholy runes in Death Knight, they give you a lot of bodies, and you get to use those bodies. And that kind of synergy runs through the draft. If you take Plague Grain at 3G, you are going to have stuff to do with bodies. And it generates bodies. So the generated bodies have a ton more value than they do in a non-green deck, or like if you pick this card as like the final card. But you would never pick this card as the final card if you didn't have anything to do with it. So this is kind of like, I'm using an Excel spreadsheet to do these now. There's no algorithm. And if there were an algorithm, I would have to program or I would have to, figure out the rune system and how that works with it. But without that, these were all off. So all the stuff that was greens and relates to generating corpses or using corpses or something to do with green synergies, they're all off. Anti-Magic Shell, we rated super low because it's a really crap card. I don't know why it's performing decently. I just wanted to flag it. Anti-Magic Shell is 3 mana, give all your minions +1/+1, and cannot be targeted by spells or hero power. That's doing pretty damn well. It shouldn't be. I still don't really understand that one. But wanted to flag it. I don't know. Maybe it'll come down.
Once again, if you're facing a lot of other Death Knights target your minions a lot with spells. That is a thing.
But they also have weapons.
No, they have weapons, but
and they have rush minions.
If you think about your Death Knight versus Death Knight matchup, right? Pretty high percentage of them clearing your board is not really them establishing minions. It is them playing spells. I understand there's AoE, which is not targeted, but there's a lot of targeted spells as well. And then you actually take away quite a lot from the opposing Death Knight. I say Demon Hunter. From the opposing Death Knight by doing the anti-magic shell.
Okay. Maybe. I mean, I have no explanation for it, so that's a better explanation than I have.
An amazing card, right? But it's like, here's why it's not trash.
Yeah. So the other card that we rated, I don't know, that one's actually rated not that off from where it is. But let's go to the one that people keep bringing up. This is probably the one that gets brought up the most, which is Malignant Horror. Malignant Horror is brought up a lot because it is a Death Knight card that has no runes. So every single Death Knight gets offered it a lot, which means you see it a lot. And if you don't have other cards that use your corpses, Malignant Horror will use all your corpses. This is the 4 mana 2/4 reborn that says summon a copy of it if you can use 5 corpses at the end of your turn. So it's usually not the best 4-drop unless you're synergized with it, but after that, whenever you get some corpses, it can snowball out of control, or it's just like pretty damn good value. No taunts or anything. And that gets brought up a lot, not because we rated it wrong, but because people somehow think this is like a S tier card or something. Like, I think people have such PTSD from Malignant Horror, and I understand because I have PTSD from Malignant Horror. But they have such they have been destroyed by this card so often because it clearly is a very snowbally card where you either get decent value from it or you get amazing game-winning value from it. That they think that this card is really, 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 really good. Win rate wise, this card is just regular good. So we rated it a B. And this card is maybe a B plus. Like, we are not off on this. The win rates, it has a win rate of what a B plus card would be. And we rated it a B. That is not significantly off at all. But I don't think anybody listening to this would think about this card and say, oh yeah, the win rate for this card for 4.5 win players is around a B plus. I think everyone will be like, it's at least an A, probably an A plus, maybe an S. And that's just not the reality. So this is one in which I seriously think we were a tiny bit off, if that. And we were a tiny bit off for the compared to the other G ones that like generate corpses and use corpses and whatever. We were actually not off on this by much at all. For a corpse using card, this is actually one of the ones in which we were less off than on average. Given the whole tilt kind of got away from us on this whole mega synergy kind of thing with greens. And the win rates reflect that because it is offered in every class, and every class does take it, but it would work better if you had a whole bunch of Gs. So yeah. So think a little more openly about Malignant Horror in your drafts, meaning don't draft it that much. Like, still draft a lot. It's a B plus card. Those should be drafted more often than not. But just know that you will often, not most of the time, but you will often have better options in your other two cards. Unless you happen to really synergize, your deck happens to really synergize well with a Malignant Horror. All right, that's my my card review of our rankings. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That is indeed the meta, and we will see how it plays out in terms of changes. Have we basically heard anything from Matt London on Twitter, or because they usually? I mean, I'm not saying they give like tons of information, but have they said anything about like our changes coming?
I don't think so. I don't think they've said anything. Changes have to be coming at some point because this is silly. This meta is like basically unplayable. Oh, if you don't retire decks, and if you do retire decks, this is a very, very expensive meta to play in. So I don't know. Yeah, but they haven't said anything about when the next update is, or what they're going to do with it. We do know that I think there's a patch coming in 2 weeks or something, or like a week and a half maybe. Like a big patch that has to do with constructed and everything. And that we almost forgot a big news. They nerfed Sire.
Yay!
Sire's not in Arena anymore.
That's definitely what is on top of everyone's mind. Sire, right now in current meta. Yes.
Isn't it amazing how nobody thinks about Sire anymore after it being on the tip of everybody's tongue forever?
Well, yeah, because it's not. I mean, it's literally not relevant. Like it's just not relevant at all. But yes, it is nerfed. Congratulations, we did it.
So yeah, we finally did it. Sire got nerfed. But yeah, looking forward on that big patch that'll probably tweak around some cards for constructed purposes. Maybe that's when the arena update's going to happen. We always hope it happens sooner, but I just don't know what they're going to do with it. Because even if their solution is something like, oh, okay, Death Knights only, that takes time to program and test and make sure it's not super buggy and breaks everything. So I don't know. I think this could be one of those times in which they are actually just frozen and their normal set of tools they know won't work. So like I said before, my prediction is that they will fake it, right? They'll say like, hey, we adjusted arena offering rates to, have better class balance. And they know it won't work. and they don't go too hard with it, and it doesn't work, but they've done something, right? So I don't know when they're going to do that move, but I imagine that move is coming. The actual fix, I don't know. I don't even know if it's going to happen in the 1.5 week from now. Not big. Well, relatively big. A balance patch. I don't even think it's going to happen there. I don't know when it'll happen. I hope it happens immediately. This has to be like, I know Arena is not at the top of the devs list for stuff, but when you look at 62% win rate for Death Knight and 35% win rate for Warrior, you've got to elevate that as a concern. Like, the Arena is basically unplayable without retiring decks right now. So hopefully they do something about, like, something real about it, not the fake move that I think they're going to do because they can't do anything else fast. But hopefully the actual solution will come pretty fast. It's not going to happen next week, like the actual solution. At earliest, it's going to happen the week after next week, so that people can go into the holidays with a functioning arena system. Like, I feel like that has to be one of their goals. That before they all go on vacation, so next Tuesday or Wednesday, I think it's the Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, whenever they do that big patch, that's going to be the last patch or hotfix that you see for like 3 weeks. This is what Blizzard does. We've seen this happen before every single year. Nothing happens between a few days before Christmas and like a week and a half after New Year's. So if it's not done in a week and a half, you're just looking at this for a long time.
Yep. Great.
Yay.
Okay. That's it for this week.
Yeah, that's it for this week. Fingers crossed something happens, but I wouldn't get my hopes up that it fixes anything. Until next week, I mean, we'll still talk about it, and we'll I don't know. Merps isn't going to play more probably, but I will continue playing a little in the arena and seeing what happens. You can check out the arena coup, which we're doing after this podcast. For our first run, which may be Death Knight, but probably won't be Death Knight. Because again, you only have 3 shots at it out of 11 classes now. So it's not that high of a chance. Alright. Until next week, this is Oddwickto.
This is Merps. Goodbye.